making sure they understand that it's a business transaction and there's a risk to it that they need to be willing to take as well. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
That's incredibly helpful. Thank you. So like, maybe next up to dig in a bit more on like the different sources of like funding and kind of how to decide what's the best fit for your business. Like maybe Catherine, like we'd love to hear a bit about like the different programs and options for funding at ECDI.
Sure, absolutely. So we are considered a CDFI. Everything we do is SBA related and SBA backed. So we have a microloan program, which is typically loans of $50,000 and under. Everything we do is a loan. It's not a grant. It's not a line of credit. It's a loan. So it's a physical monthly repayment based on what your project is. So really good segue, if you were talking about know what it is that you're borrowing for, that's 100% what we're going to dig into. Anyone who's gone through our process, it can be a little bit timely because we do want to see what that breakdown is so that the dollar amount that you're borrowing makes sense. So depending on where that dollar amount falls in, it can be in the microloan program, which is typically loans up to about $50,000, repaid over 5 years, carry a fixed interest rate right now between about 10 and 13%. Depending on how much you're looking to take out, there may be a collateral requirement, there may be an equity injection requirement, because a lot of times we want to see that you put funding into the business and you're not financing that project 100%. And then if it's a larger project that you're looking to borrow for, that's where it kicks into our SBA 7(a) loan program. Those are repaid over 10 years with a fixed interest rate right now, I'd say between 12 and a quarter and 13%. Our loan rates are a little bit higher than what a traditional bank loan rate is going to come in at, but that's kind of where we come into play. We're here when you try to do bank financing and maybe your personal credit score is too low, or maybe you don't have any collateral. You know, you're new in the business, you've got all of your money into it, but you're not a homeowner, which is totally fine. You know, maybe it's the time in business. It's hard to get a loan as a startup business with projections from a financial institution. They want to see you've been in business for 2 or 3 years and see that historical data. We do a lot of projections. You know, we're going to want to see 3 years of a cash flow statement, which is going to be your projected revenue and your projected expenses. We're going to want to see, are you going to generate enough revenue to make that loan payment back to us? And whether it's us or another financial institution, these are the numbers that they're going to dig into. They want to see, you know, how are you going to repay that loan? Do you have outside income that's going to cover that loan payment, or is it all strictly based on the revenue that you're generating from your business? And then really just digging down into what that scope of the project looks like. For us, we want to see, you know, if it's inventory, how much is that inventory going to cost you? Where are you sourcing all of your packaging goods? Who's that vendor? How many do you need of that product? How much is it going to cost? If you are food-based and you need ingredients, we're going to want to see, you know, who's the vendor for that? What's the product that you're buying? There's a lot of invoices or estimates or quotes or things that we're going to capture because we just want to make sure that you're borrowing enough for that project, but not overextending it where you've got this gigantic loan that you have to repay. I would say it's hard to think small, but think in like smaller projects. You can always have more than one loan with a financial institution, and one of the things that's great is if we can see that repayment, you can always come back and take out another loan as well.
Why not offer a line of credit then? I mean, that would simplify things so
A line of credit would be amazing. So we're a small financial institution, and from a processing standpoint, we just don't have the manpower to do those draws and repayments through the system. It is something that we've talked about doing, especially in this food-based business, because there's so many restaurants that come to us, and it's all food product, right? And it would be great if we had a line of credit. It's something that has been in conversation, you know, behind the scenes, and maybe, hopefully, that could be something we can bring to the market.
Yeah, $25,000 line of credit could be transformational for most people in this room, because most of us are selling product and we need to pay back, you know, pay what we've taken out, and then we need to advance money for our next production of goods. We know we're going to sell it, we can pay it back, but that static loan is for a specific production run.
Yeah. And I think if you had a good small
I have a line
business,
of credit through
Yeah,
PBO, which was simple. They
Yeah.
look at your cash flow, they give you the money in 24 hours, and it's based on without supplying any documentation to a third party, and the interest rate was 8.99%.
That's really good.
So, I mean, and I've had a static loan with QuickBooks Capital as well. It has been, and then I just got an American Express 12-month no interest business credit card for $25,000. So I mean, but I've been in business now for almost 5 years. But access to capital, you know, I self-funded, you know, until I had some history through QuickBooks and I got my first loan, which was around $8,000. I paid that off and now I have the line of credit. You know, the steps that you have to go through, I will tell you that my CPA flat out refused to do forecasting because there's no giving in this business. I can't tell you that the customers that I have today are going to be the customers I have 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 3 years. Are you kidding me? I can't tell you who I'm going to have because our partners, a lot of them are small. They're opening and closing, they're dropping, they're adding, and so they said, there's no way that we can do forecasting for you because it's not based on anything that you can guarantee.
Right. It's kind of an airball, and we all understand that, but there are some industry standards too. Like if you come to me based on so I had somebody that applied for a loan that showed they were going to go from like 23,000 to 2 million in revenue in 2 years. I'm like, that's just not going to happen. So there are some things that we can see that we're like, let's dial that back, let's reevaluate. It was not going to happen. But you go back to those industry standards, and I think the biggest thing for you, any business owner, is to know if I sell something, how many of this item do I need to sell for my break even?
Right.
That's really a big key factor. I mean, you do have to kind of know what those numbers look like, but yeah, doing projections, it's an airball, for sure.
And I would say, just to follow up on the projections piece, I think like you're saying, like a lot of it, like when you're super early stage and thinking about it, is good. Like there's so many different variables, like at least having like the building blocks behind it, like what are the key like assumptions? So it's like if you're thinking about like, you know, if you're building out to like a revenue projection, like you can just, instead of just having like, okay, we're going from 23,000 to like $2 million, it's like, okay, if I'm breaking down the $2 million, that means that like, you know, the average customer order value is $100, which means we need to have this many customers, and like if I look at my different sources and stuff, like here's the assumptions that I'm getting from each one of those, and then that gives somebody like a lender or a potential investor a chance to like go through and review, kind of pressure test the assumptions on their own and be like, okay, like do I believe that they can grow, you know, their customer, like their recurring customer base from X to Y? If I pull that back, what are the implications there? And that just makes it, I think it also just signifies that you have a better understanding of like the business versus like, I'm just throwing out like, I want to get to $1 million and I have no idea what like the map is to get there.
Yeah, we need a inventory, you know?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then there's like there's a cash flow implication of that too, and like so it's like thinking through like the building blocks and methodology, like how exactly like what has to happen in order to get there, and what are the key assumptions and like levers and building blocks is like I think is really helpful for like again signifying like your knowledge of like the business to an investor or potential like lender.
So what if you are not desiring to buy equipment? So we ran into this in the grant space because we applied for a Main Street grant and some other grants because we just needed capital for products so we could try to go after some larger customers, but we have a co-packer and we're not interested in producing our own goods any longer, right? It seemed to me that there was less interest from a grant or even from a loan perspective to just provide capital for day-to-day operations where you're not making an investment in equipment. Do I have that right in my head? Because it seems like every time that we've gone through this process, we've either lost or been rejected because it's really trying to build ourselves up from a product perspective to where we could then engage with larger clients and make sure that we have enough stock to be able to deliver to them on a consistent basis. There seems to be a lot less interest in that than investing in equipment. Things that...
Yeah. Well, I was just, I think that, yeah, because I feel like we'd love for you guys to chime in, but like, it seems like for more of the, like, if you're getting a, like, loan or grant or something, it's for, like, here's a specific, like, you know, I'm investing $50,000 in, like, this specific, like, function or product or something that I'm doing versus, like, more of the, like, you know, it's almost like receivables, like financing or something is going to be, you know, it's like, it's not like a great, like, doing a larger loan or something like that, like, it's not going to be, like, a great fit for that. So it's more finding somebody that can do, you know, that's like really like, it's like if I look at like your like your like working capital requirements or something, like they can lend against understands that based on like how your business has been performing historically. But
If I wanted to buy a truck to do wholesale deliveries, that would be,
then that would be like a better fit.
okay.
But I will say, you know, when you're looking at that working capital need, a lot of times, when we're looking at working capital, we're looking at like 4 to 5 months of working capital. So there's a worksheet that we can go through of what your operational expenses look like. But if it's to build inventory so that you can get that next bigger client, if you have like a letter of interest or intent or something, where we can see some sort of communication where, you know, this buyer is interested, but you don't have the supply yet, we can kind of look at that on the back end as, here's your potential customer. If we can get you this amount of money, you're gonna be able to land this contract.
The problem is that those type of customers give you a letter of intent and like I had a, you know, PO factoring or, invoice factoring or PO lending, they require you a PO to lend you money, but then clients don't give you a formal PO until maybe 30 days before. You need to buy your ingredients with 6 to 8 weeks notice and produce much ahead. So it's not a 30-day process, it's like a 90-day process to prepare. So all of those things are very tricky, and sometimes institutions say a letter of intent is not enough. You need an actual PO. And then they say, oh, but your numbers are not all that big. I mean, I need at least $250,000 a year in sales to justify me lending you for inventory. So then you are in that limbo of being too small but not enough to actually get lending from those companies. There's a threshold of the $250,000 where most of them actually lend to you. There's a company called Settle, I don't know if you've heard of it, or Kickstarter. They are inventory softwares that help you with your inventory management, but they also lend you for your purchases of inventory. Like you have to have a minimum of 250 or 500,000, depending on what company it is. And then with institutions like yours, you need your inventory yesterday. So to go through that process of the lending and getting a yes in 45 days, you cannot sleep at night.
Timing is a big factor, and especially, I mean, we've worked together, and to do a loan turnaround, it can be 2 to 3 months. So you kind of have to plan ahead in what you're looking to do. I know you had some
Yeah,
questions.
I was listening to a couple of the comments and wondering, because you know, the term, or the idea of forecasting came up earlier. I think it might be interesting from a lender's perspective to speak to what are your expectations of a forecast? Because like one of the comments I heard earlier was, I have no idea what it's going to look like 3 years from now. I can't commit to that. And from my perspective, a forecast is not a commitment. It's a kind of educated guess. Maybe Greg, you spoke to it like, you know, let's put the building blocks together of what it could look like if we've got 10 customers now doing 100 units per week, and we had 5 customers every 6 months, like then we've got 30 customers doing 100 units a week, you know, whatever. But from a lender's perspective, it might be helpful to share, what are your expectations of a forecast? What is a forecast that you would say, yeah, I'll buy on that, or, you know, I'm willing to support that?
I think it really just comes back to what that break-even cost is gonna be. So it's hard in the lending world, because a lot of times you're not gonna generate any revenue in that first year. So really it's gonna come down to, is there outside income or things to support that loan payment back to the financial institution? Or is your only income coming from selling that product? So you're not, how are you gonna make that payment during that first year? Or even that second year? But I like how you kind of said, like, my goal is, 5 clients, and then maybe in 6 months we'll add 5 more. That's a very strategic and conservative approach, and that's what a financial institution is gonna wanna see. That conservative approach is the better way to go. You might be able to say, yes, I'm gonna be able to add 10 or